committee leads for what's going to work with your thing. So stay tuned for that, please. World Trade Center 5, Empire State Development Corporation has a nice large team. I welcome you to the meeting. And who do we have who's going to kick off the presentation tonight? Jen and Lucian, have you been able to move them over?
Yeah, Jen and I are going to switch host, and I'll start moving everyone over.
Yep. And I think we have one of our board members stuck over in the
Yep. I'll make sure I get Jill too. To bear with me because here we are.
No problem. And next time when we have presenters, let's just move them all over. They can manage to keep themselves quiet for another presentation.
Toby, so I moved you over so you can let me know who I'm missing as I move people.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Lucian, thank you. I see my colleague Dara McQuillan. I see Mike Lavery.
Our architect, Rob Whitlock.
Yeah, we need my colleague Charlie Howe as well.
Oh, okay.
Dewana Williams.
I'm sorry, what's the architect's name?
I think we're good. I believe the architect and design team are with Charlie, so we'd be able to use. We just need to. Let me make sure. Yeah, I think we're good. If
I think we got to
send you a note if that changes. The only thing I'd need now is just the ability to share screen. And after I've presented, then Charlie Howe would need the ability to share screen.
You got it, Toby.
That'd be
send it over to you now.
So
Luke, can you move Justin over?
And Justin Burnback, apologies. Thank you.
Anybody who has not moved over, feel free to chat to the host. We'll get them moved over expediently.
Please.
Toby, all the presenters can unmute themselves. You don't need to wait for any of us to unmute you on this. We will ask the committee to hold their questions until the Q&A portion at the end. And for everyone on the call, we're going to do the same thing we've done before. It is you go around once, you get one 2-minute question back to. If you have more questions, you have to wait until the end till we get through everybody, because we do have quite a lot of members of the public here with us.
And I'm sorry, Jill, I'm trying to move you over, but it's not letting me. So I can unmute you when it's time, or you might have to sign back out and in, but I'm not getting the option to move you over. I'm sorry.
Take it away, Toby. Thank you very much. And welcome to the team.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing us to come before you tonight to provide updates on the World Trade Center Site 5 project. My name is Toby Jaisimi, and I am here on behalf of ESD, and I'm joined by my colleagues, co-public sponsors for the project, representatives from the Port Authority, and also members of the development team who you'll get to meet a little bit later. Wanted to just give a quick run through of the structure of the presentation. We wanted to ensure that we are succinct as possible in the updates that we provide to allow you time to share and for us to hear your questions and your comments. And so I'll quickly provide some background. We've been before the community board now for a few times, but recognizing that we're not speaking to the same audience each time, we're going to provide a quick update and background on the project, provide some responses to questions that we've received from the community board, and then we will also give a quick design presentation on the World Trade Center Site 5 project, and then allow for there to be Q&A. I hope you're all able to view my screen well. Just
Toby,
some
your
background.
screen is itty bitty. It's very
Itty-
small.
It's
Itty-
minimized. You have to maximize it.
Itty bitty. All right, let's do that. Excuse me while I figure this out. How's that?
Well, now I can see the whole screen's worth of weight. That's much better.
Okay, great. Thank you. I was trying to share my screen and have my notes up at the same time. Awesome. So, giving some background on the project, apologies, scroll to the right side. There we go. Okay, so LMDC, which is the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, had used HUD grants and HUD funds to acquire, remediate, and clear Site 5, which is the former Deutsche Bank building that was destroyed during the 9/11 attacks. In 2014, the World Trade Center General Project Plan approved commercial and/or hotel use for Site 5, and that GPP, the General Project Plan, provided for an approximately 900-foot tower on Site 5. We'd received a question just quickly in the timeline about an RFQ that was issued by the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation with regards to looking at housing south of Chambers Street. My understanding, just from the quick research that I did, was that that RFQ was issued sometime back in 2002. We're looking into that, and we'll hope to provide more details as we dig up that information, but just wanted to note that we've gotten that question. Moving ahead in the timeline, February 2006, there was an agreement between LMDC, which is the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, and the Port Authority, under which the port exchanged property that it owned for the development of the 9/11 Memorial and Museum and the Performing Arts site, and that in turn allowed for the port to have an interest in LMDC's owned Site 5. The land swap was designed such that rather than receiving rental revenue from the Performing Arts Center, the museum, and the memorial, the port would have rights to the development of Site 5. We've gotten some questions as we've gone over this aspect of the project as it relates to air rights and development rights. Please note that the 9/11 Memorial and Museum site, because it's not subject to New York City zoning, the concept of transferable development rights or air rights isn't applicable here. It's subject to the general project plan, which states the uses and density restrictions herein. Continuing on after that MOU with regards to the swap of the site in February 2019, LMDC and the Port Authority agreed to jointly issue an RFP for Site 5 that would allow for either the commercial development as of right or for a mixed-use development, which would require modifications to the general project plan. In June 2019, that RFP was released. The RFP was scored by a committee with representation from the City of New York, the Port Authority, and ESD. The pandemic did not have any effect on the scoring of the RFP. Each proposal was reviewed and scored according to, financial offering, feasibility, project program design, community benefits, respondent experience execution, and also diversity practices. There was a question as to whether or not the details with regards to the scoring and the process by which the committee did their scoring was subject to open meetings law. That committee is not a public body. The selection panel scored the proposal according to the criteria that was included in the RFP. The selection panel then, of course, made a recommendation to the relevant boards, the ESD, the LMDC, and Port Authority boards. And it's at that point in February of this year, 2021, there was conditional designation of the development team. I just wanted to share with you quickly, again, just the background of the development team here. It's a partnership with Silverstein Properties, Brookfield Properties, Omni New York, and the Bar Development. I'll note that Omni and the Bar are both expert developers in the realm of affordable housing and have a lot of experience and background related to providing affordable housing across the city, the state, and across the country. There's also been questions that we've received with regards to some of the details of other RFPs, with this development team having been the highest scoring proposal. I'll note that the project remains an open procurement until final approval, and negotiations are ongoing. So there's certain aspects of the deal that won't be public and will remain confidential until said approvals are received. Moving quickly, again, this is just to afford us a quick background, just to bring folks up to speed. What the project would be, we'd have a mixed use income residential tower, again, with there being an affordability mix. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Office, community facility, an amenity space, and also retail. It's important to note that the land for this site is not free. There'd be a 99-year ground lease with payments from the developer to ESD and from ESD to the Port Authority. I believe we'd gotten an inquiry and a question with regards to the structure of the deal and the role that each agency plays. The structure by which ESD collects rent payments and submits those funds to the port is not unique to Site 5. It's happened across other projects in which ESD and Port Authority are co-sponsors. For example, the Queens West Development Project out in Long Island City. Wanted to take some time just to go into a little detail. We shared the same slide at our last presentation, but just to touch on, the public benefits, specifically for the affordable housing and community facility. Right now, the way that the project is being proposed, it'd be 25% of all the residential units would be permanently affordable, which would mean hundreds of affordable housing unit with an average of 50% of AMI. An example of that would be approximately $42,000 annual income for an individual or $60,000 annual income for a family of 4. There'd be a regulatory agreement that would be in place with a New York State Housing, Homes and Community Renewal to set the defined terms of what the affordability requirements would be for the project. But we wanted to note the concerns that we've gotten from the public. We've also had engagement with elected officials who have expressed interest in seeing an increase in the affordability rates for the project. We've met with the elected officials. They've given us some homework and tasks in which we have to go back and look at what the public subsidy and the additional funds that would be required to increase the affordability rate at the project. So we're doing that homework. We hear you, we're working through it. And then once we have more detailed update, we'll be sure to provide that, but we're taking our direction, both from what we've heard from the public and also from the elected officials as it relates to the affordability aspect of the project. At this time, I would also just like to quickly mention, of course, for those who may not be familiar, that the development team is looking at a potential operator for the community facility in response to the feedback that we've gotten so far. We'd like to see it be a multi-use facility offering a range of intergenerational services. But to touch more a little bit on affordability and to answer some of the other general questions that we've gotten on the project, I'd invite my colleague, Dewana Williams, who's also with DeVar Development, co-developers for the project, to just share some general updates. Dewana?
Thank you, Toby. Good evening, Community Board 1, and thank you again for having us. I know the hour is late, so we will keep it brief so that we can get to the questions and the rest of the presentation. But we have listened to your comments and received your feedback and taken it very seriously, and just wanted to provide a few responses to requests as well as clarifications and some of the questions that have come up multiple times. I know we've touched on them, but I wanted to provide just some clarification on a few things. One is with respect to community preferences. Our goal is to reserve 50% of the affordable housing units for residents in Community District 1. That is our goal. We have discussed with you, and we received more questions about it, that there is an ongoing lawsuit against the City of New York regarding community preference. I'll provide the name. There are actually 2 lawsuits. I'll provide the names. I can even put them in chat if desired. But the lawsuits are Winfield versus the City of New York and Knoll versus the City of New York. The last major movement on the case was in 2019, just before the pandemic. So things have slowed down since the pandemic. We are all hopeful that the city will prevail in the lawsuits and that community preferences will, in some form, will prevail. And in that case, we will reserve, our goal is to reserve 50% of the affordable housing units for residents in Community District 1. So wanted to reiterate that, but also make you aware of the ongoing lawsuit that is happening. Secondly, and somewhat related to community preference, is the special interest groups. There have been multiple questions regarding a set aside for first responders, survivors, children, and essential workers. I think that this is actually, I know there are a lot of feelings about what's happening on the site, but this is one area in which we are aligned. Our desire and goal is to consider a set aside. We are, though, challenged with the federal Fair Housing Act, as well as the impact of the lawsuit or the outcome of the lawsuit. So depending on how it turns out and how we can find a nuanced approach to the federal Fair Housing Act, that will impact whether or not we're able to provide a set aside. But we are, along with our colleagues at the state, reviewing this. So it is under review. We wanted to share that we are aligned in a desire for a set aside, but the review is ongoing. The third thing that we think was worth highlighting is the issue of permanent affordability. We received multiple questions about it. Wanted to clarify that there are no expiration dates of the affordability requirement. And we've been asked about mechanisms or how is this going to be documented. Toby just mentioned the regulatory agreement. There are usually three ways. The regulatory agreement is one way. There will also be a restrictive covenant on the title. And thirdly, registration with the state of New York, which will be a public record. And you can check that annually to see that the affordable housing units are permanently affordable. Lastly, as Toby mentioned, we have met with the electeds. This was a significant goal that we've heard from the community, and we took it seriously. We met with Assembly Member Yuling New, State Senator Brian Kavanaugh, Congressman Nadler's representatives, and Borough President Gail Brewer's representatives. And we had a significant discussion about the question over increased affordability. As was just mentioned by Toby, my firm DeBar and Omni are, we're major affordable housing developers and have been doing this for about 20 years. We are familiar with all of the programs that work for affordable housing. So we are exploring options. We are reviewing all of the programs. We don't have answers yet. We are working on an analysis. In light of limited state resources, we are investigating what's available and wanted to report back that this is undergoing. We don't have a report yet for you, but we are working on it. And this would be in addition to the 300 plus affordable units that are already being provided with no subsidy. So Toby, back to you.
Thank you for that, Dawana. So again, trying to be as efficient as we can with our time. I'm going to just quickly pull up a slide. This is meant to be meant to be the last slide, but I just wanted to provide folks with my contact information and my email addresses. Project lead for ESD. It's my full name, which is oluwatobi.jaisimi@esd.ny.gov. Again, we welcome continued discussion and engagement on the project. This will not be the last opportunity for us to engage with us. We came before you in August rather. We're here in September, and we'll continue to coordinate with the community board to provide updates on the project as we have them available. Related to affordable housing, as Dawana alluded to, more aspects of the design, which you'll see in a few minutes, and other key parts of the project. So with that being said, I'm going to temporarily stop sharing my screen and invite my colleague Dara McQuillan to speak, and then we'd segue into the design presentation.
Thanks, Toby. Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dara McQuillan. I work at Silverstein Properties. My office is at 7 World Trade Center, and I live on Liberty Street. So my whole life is within a 6-block radius of 5 World Trade Center. Aside from affordability, which is obviously an important topic and something that I believe we're going to be discussing today, and building design, which we'll be talking about in a minute, the community has brought up a whole range of topics and issues to our attention. And I just wanted to update you on 3 of those that were raised the last time we met and in a number of recent meetings. First of all is the sustainability goals and objectives of this project. Our organization, as I think many of you know, is very committed to sustainability, energy efficiency, and resiliency. And this building will be designed to the LEED Gold standard, which is consistent with all of the other towers at the World Trade Center. And we will come back to you with more updates once we get further along in the design process. Another issue that has been raised and is ongoing is vehicular access to the building. And, we've all looked into the possibility of taking a left turn on West Street at Albany Street. So we commissioned a traffic study of the broader neighborhood from Philip Habib to address the possibility of this left turn, and also to identify any obstacles we collectively would encounter as we meet with the city and state DOT. And it's a study that I'd like to share with the community board, hopefully very soon, within the next week or two, so that we can look at it together. And as we sit down with city and state DOT, hopefully, work with them to make that happen. There's a lot of technical data that goes into this sort of stuff that's way too difficult for me to understand. So I'm trying to digest it along with the rest of the team. And then, Toby and her team at Empire State Development is going to set up meetings with the city and state DOT. So we look forward to that, and hopefully we will be successful, because I think it's something we all want. And the third update I'd like to give you is, with respect to the community center within the building, at the community board's suggestion, we met with Educational Alliance, which are the operators of the Manny Cantor Center. And we are in discussions with them to be consultants on the programming of the space, which means that they will hold discussions with you, with community leaders, local businesses, and key community stakeholders to figure out what is the best use of the space from a programming perspective. And then we would like them to be the operators of that facility. So, we have a sort of a letter of intent or a handshake agreement with them at the moment, and we're negotiating, a more solid agreement. But we're very happy with everything we've seen so far. We think they're terrific, and we think they'll be great partners, not just for us in the building, but for everyone in the neighborhood. So those are my 3 updates, and now I'd like to hand it over to Rob Whitlock, who's going to give us a design update and focus on the context of the building within our neighborhood.
Lucian, just a point of logistics, if you would please allow Rob Whitlock, who's presenting under the name of Charlie Howe, to have the ability to share his screen.
You got it.
While he's doing that, just a reminder, Toby, that we would be posting all of this live. So anybody who didn't get a chance to see the details on some of the slides that you had up will be able to view that off of either our live stream page or from the CB.
Thank you.
Mr. Howe, is everything going all right with the screen share?
I think it's Mr. Whitlock framed as Mr. Howe.
That's correct. We're not attempting to misrepresent identities. It's just a matter of logistics and ensuring that we have the technology available. That is Mr. Howe that's now coming into the frame. He's assisting Mr. Whitlock in the presentation.
I heard the name and then I couldn't remember it, so I just went with Howe. Is everything all right with the screen share, Mr. Whitlock?
And as a reminder for everybody, we are asking you to have your questions written, hold on to them, and we will go through all the Q&A with the panel after this presentation on design. Although Toby, if he's having troubles, if they can't figure out we can let them tinker with it and take some Q&A. It's up to you.
Charlie, another thing we can do just quickly, if you'd like to email me the presentation, and since I've had an easier time with it, I can try to slide through. We can have that as a backup option as well. I want to be respectful again of the community board members' time. So just let me know what works best.
Charlie, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm not able to hear you, Charlie.
It doesn't look like he's connected his audio.
Yeah, if you can afford us just a quick 30 seconds, I guess we can take some preliminary questions on what myself, actually, I do have to apologize. This is actually a great moment of transition. I'd overlooked a presentation from my colleagues from the Port Authority. So at this time, I'd like to invite Mike Lavery and Justin Bernbach, if they're on, to provide some responses and general comments on behalf of the Port Authority. My apologies. Justin, Mike.
Thanks, Toby. Thanks for having us tonight. I'm Justin Bernbach, Director of Government Relations for the Port Authority. What I'm going to cover, Mike can cover some of the other questions in a second, but one of the questions that came up in the past and that was compiled by Diana and sent to us had to do with this phrase that has come up a couple times, made whole. What that actually means for the Port Authority to be made whole in this deal. I just want to take a second to explain kind of what we mean by that. It's probably our fault at the Port Authority that we didn't kind of clear this up earlier. But first of all, I mean, it's not so much that we're being made whole in the deal, but that was we were made whole in a way in the land swap. Holly Light and Toby have spoken a lot about the land swap. What happened for those who, it was actually in Toby's presentation, so I won't belabor it. But by us giving up the land for the PAC and the Memorial and Museum, we had foregone a large amount of office space that had been in the original plan for us to develop, and that was in turn meant to replace what was lost in the Twin Towers. So what we got in return for giving up that land was the right to develop office space that would make us whole, and that's what it means in this context, by replacing the foregone office space, which was, as I said, meant to replace the lost office space from 9/11. So there was no way, and what I should say about that swap is I wasn't here at the time, but it wasn't based on any precise numbers, precise valuations of the property. It was a neutral exchange of properties that was seen to be in the public interest, and that was allowed those two elements to be placed on the site while we developed the parcel at Site 5. So we couldn't know then what the valuation of that would be. There was no way to, and in terms of whether we're made whole in this transaction, that's kind of the subject of the ongoing lease negotiations, which are not completed yet. So I know the next question would naturally be, okay, well, what are you earning? And I'll not answer that question, but I'll deal with it by saying a couple things. One, the lease negotiations are ongoing, and we'll have a better sense of that soon. Two, when the meeting that was referenced by both Toby and Delana with the elected officials, in the context of that meeting, we were asked, what is the port? Exactly that question. What is the port's lease payment? How much will they earn from this? So we're going to answer that question to some degree, or we plan to answer that question in the same context. We're going to get back to the electeds. We're going to sit down and have just a thorough conversation about all the opportunities in terms of affordable housing and what what our financial stake is and how that looks in that context. So on that piece, I'd ask for your patience at this point, but I would say also, I don't want to take up too much time, but keep in mind, I think two things, which is that whatever we do earn from this over the life of the project is going to be a small fraction. And I'm not talking about like 7/8 or 9/10. I mean, a small fraction of what we've invested in the site over 20 years. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. But more importantly, I think more to the point is that this money that we do earn is required for us. It's needed for our capital plan. It is not, we don't earn a profit. We're obviously a public agency. Every dollar we earn goes back into our capital plan or into our operations. We only earn money in really two ways, which is user fees, which is like path fares and bridge and tunnel tolls, and rents on the properties that we control. So that's the context. Hope that answers the question, at least moves the ball forward. If there's any follow-up questions, I can take them now or afterwards if the architectural presentation is ready.
In the interest of time, why don't we allow for Rob and Charlie to lead us through the design presentation as expeditiously as possible. And then again, we're here to listen. We're here to hear you and receive your comments and your questions. And so I'll now allow for Rob, Whitlock, and Charlie to give out quick design presentation, and then we'll go to the question and comment section.
Toby, and I want to make sure that you understand that the community has said it in the last 2 meetings, and so I'm delighted that the Port Authority is here, because more than listen, the community has questions that they want answered. There have been some answers tonight, but we do want to have answers more than just yes, we got.
Thank you for that.
And continue.
Rob?
Charlie, you're on.
We see your presentation, but don't hear you.
Charlie, unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Can you hear us now?
Indeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to present an overview of the project and focusing on the overall appearance, and then we've heard from you the importance of the way the building we'd like to combat, the way that the building is available to the community,
Charlie, can you stay directly in front of your computer where the microphone is? I don't know if you're moving at all, but you're sort of waffling in and out for sound. I apologize.
Can you hear me now? Is that good?
It's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Much better.
We had multiple microphones working, so, okay, apologies. So all right, we get the page to advance.
There you go. I can hear you now, Charlie. Go for it.
Oh, okay, sorry. The tower, as Toby mentioned earlier, sits on the former Deutsche Bank site. So it fills the last remaining spot of the World Trade Center master plan. More importantly to us, we see it as a building that's a bridge and a gateway to the surrounding community, particularly Greenwich South. Toby spoke about the makeup of the building. I think one of the things that's important to note is that this mixed-use tower with residential above 5 floors, 6 floors of office below, gives us an opportunity to express the building in 2 ways. The tower addresses the sort of city context, and we see the podium, the design of the podium, as a way to introduce an element that's more of a scale of the historic buildings, brings the scale of the building down. So unlike the all-office buildings of the previous World Trade Center development, we have the opportunity to develop the building at a different scale. The building does sit between the World Trade Center area. It connects a lot of neighborhoods, Battery Park City, the rest of Community Ward 1 to the east, but its immediate adjacency is to the Greenwich South neighborhood. And we've looked at that neighborhood to take some architectural clues to give us an idea of how to make the building feel more like it is part of that neighborhood. As I think you know, the building is made up of a variety of buildings, a variety of scales and periods of time. 120 Greenwich, which is the site just immediately south of ours, is a building that seems to be an appropriate starting point to think about the scale of the building and its architectural design, though we're drawing on a lot of references from the neighborhood. That building, as many buildings of that era were designed, the facade is made up of 3 pieces: a base that relates to the street, an attic story at the top that typically is more ornamental, and in the middle of the building essentially connects those 2 together. We've also identified within the community that the facades that face onto Greenwich Street, where you have the whole width of the narrow north-south block, the building occupies the entire street width. on some of the side streets, because of their length, you frequently have buildings of different styles, different periods that are juxtaposed to one another. So there's a finer grain or just a different scale that results because of that. There's a particular design of the facade, the north facade or the north side of the buildings on Albany Street with this rounded corner. Both the newer W Hotel has that, and then 120 Greenwich does as well. We've looked at materiality in the neighborhood, and while there are many different types of brick applied, the two buildings immediately adjacent to us, this is the block just south of ours, are clad in a beige brick, and those buildings are also typically framed with a limestone in some way. Buildings in this neighborhood and era are typically the windows are framed in bronze or ironwork painted in a sort of brownish color. And so there's a nice play between the warm tone of the wall and the warm tone of the frame. So drawing from these references in the vicinity, we've tried to think about how we might apply these to the building. I might add that we're in the very early schematic phases of the design. We've advanced the design of the podium ahead of the way we typically would in the process, just to give you a sense of the character that we see unfolding in the building. So this is a rendering or an elevational comparison of our projects. We do think of it as 130 Greenwich Street, not 5 World Trade. But our podium, which has 6 office floors, you'll see that the retail storefront at the ground level is two stories in height. The upper 2 floors, the glazing and outdoor spaces are recessed slightly, and then the office floors span in between. This is our building superimposed into that photograph we saw a moment ago. And here you'll see that the podium, with this much smaller residential tower floor plate above, allows us to continue the cornice line of the street and really feel like part of the neighborhood. This is a rendering looking from the northeast down Greenwich Street, and you'll see the elevation of the podium. I'll talk about the materials in a moment. You'll see that we've taken that rounded corner from the buildings to the south, and we've applied it not only to the podium, but to the tower above. To me, it was important that this building almost allowed the space from the Memorial Park to flow down Greenwich Street. So that rounded corner, I think, makes the building feel less bulky and more like a good neighbor. When we look at that elevation in detail, surrounding the glazing, we're looking at a frame that's painted in a bronze color. The large 2-story frame that you see is a material that's in a limestone color that gives the building some sort of structural appearance and strength visibility. And then we infill with the brick panel that is sort of derived from the color of the adjacent building. So we have shadow and depth and materials that refer to the neighborhood. When we look at the podium itself, this is the view looking from the southeast. So we're looking at the Albany Street facade. And here, rather than have the podium wrap the entire site as one monolithic element, we've chosen to let a piece of the tower come down so that we have these 2 facade types in juxtaposition to one another. The soffit of the tower element you see at the far end of the rendering comes down to a single story. This sort of works. The sidewalk on the site slopes 5 feet from Greenwich to Washington Street, as you probably are all aware. So in a broader compositional sense, we're trying to break the massing down on the south facade. And then the next slide, I'll talk about the design. Well, in a moment, I'll talk about the design of the storefront. So here we're looking on Albany Street from West Street, and you'll see how the building nestles into this language of base heights that are juxtaposed to one another. The ground floor of the building, you'll see in a moment, is given over to a large amount of retail. That's what you see on the ground. This building, as I mentioned a moment ago, has got office and residential. We've moved the office lobby to the 2nd floor. I'll talk about the planning of those floor plans in a moment, but we're giving a large amount of ground floor over to publicly accessible uses. So you'll see all the retail fronting. That narrow bit in the center is a small entry on the Albany Street side to give access to the residential lobby. And you'll see that we're using a bronze tone metal and then picking up on the stone base that we saw in the, that we've recognized as an element that exists elsewhere in the neighborhood. So looking at the ground floor, this is again, the Albany Street elevation showing the amount of retail. The community entry to one of the two entries to the community space exists on the western end of the Albany Street elevation. You see the changing height of the elevation. This is a preliminary rendering of the entry to the community space at that corner. The Albany-Washington intersection has three other commercial uses here. So we've made the entry as accessible as possible. As we move on to Greenwich Street, you'll see that on the right side of on the right-hand side of this image, we have a driveway that crosses the site. I'll talk about that in a minute when we look at the overall plan. There's a public entrance to the building at center, and the left-hand side, which is the Greenwich-Albany corner, is entirely given over to retail use. The Washington Street elevation has community to the right. You'll see the plan of loading dock, and in a moment we understand your concerns about making sure that loading and trash and all of that, those activities necessary for the building to function have as little impact as possible on the public realm sidewalk. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We think that the garage doors, which cater for 4 trucks, provide an opportunity for community artwork. That's something that exists, as you know, currently exists in the World Trade Center neighborhood and is really quite a welcome element in the otherwise, very glass and stone environment. So we think that could be really great. This plan shows, this is the ground floor, the RFP, presumed an office building, which would cover the entire site, property line to property line. We're proposing to create a driveway on the north side to help remove cars from the street and give, you'll see in a moment that that's sheltered by the building above, so that gives protected entry to the residential lobby, which is that small blue element at the center of the plan. There's a large amount of retail, which you see in orange. We know the desire for small community retailers. There hasn't really been a strategy for figuring out how they get subdivided. That will be part of the ongoing development. Community center on lower left. And then on the right-hand side in yellow, where we call a public entry, we're providing a route within the building to circulate through to the community center and back out to Liberty Park on the second level. You'll see that that residential buildings are comprised these days with a lot of mailboxes and package rooms. You'll notice those are absent on this plan. They've been moved to the second floor. We removed an office floor on level 2 that was envisioned as part of the RFP response. That's now given over to the office lobby, and then all of those mailboxes and package rooms for the residents. So that allows us to use a large part of the ground floor for public use. The loading dock, and I think the plan is to, in a subsequent meeting, present in much more detail how the loading dock operates, how traffic comes to and from the site. But I will note at the moment that the zoning requires 1 loading dock for a building like this. We're providing 4. All of the trash is being removed by a private hauler. All of the trash is stored inside the building until it's hauled away. All that we're providing space within the building for bicycle messengers and delivery people so that the sidewalk is unencumbered as possible. This is a plan that tells you what I just said. The loading dock, for the sake of time, we'll go past it. The driveway is essentially a single lane through. The part on the left-hand side of the page ramps up to 5 feet from Washington Street to the lobby level, and then there's a place for 4 or 5 cars to unload. We spent a lot of time working with ESD and our engineers to understand how traffic will exit onto Greenwich Street. You'll notice that the little kink in the driveway there is to allow a planted buffer to exist between the pedestrian realm of either the steps or the ramp coming down from Liberty Park, and as it confronts the driveway. And then we also see that the walkway that comes through along the face of the building there is essentially an expansion of the east-west sidewalk widths on the site. So we see that also helping to alleviate congestion on the sidewalks. This is a rendering of the driveway entrance looking from Washington Street. So the elevated park is on the left in the security center for trucks entering the trade center. You'll see that our podium cantilever is about 30 feet over the driveway below. The bridge that you see in the foreground provides pedestrian connectivity from Liberty Park directly into the community space. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. And you see the level of detail and then greenery that we're proposing to add to that southern wall of the Liberty Park, which at the moment is unarticulated. This is this view of the driveway from Greenwich Street. So you'll see we're removing the building structure from the face of the podium above and pulling it inside to provide much greater visual porosity between Liberty Park and this through passage, which we see as essentially a public space. And so I think this is, we're pleased with the way the building and the park are coming together. You imagine if this was an office building just coming down at that property line, it'd be a very different proposition. So the public space within the building, this is the second floor plan. As you enter from the public entry on Greenwich Street at ground, that gives you access to either an ADA lift or an escalator that brings you up into this public passage that you see in yellow on the plan. That runs along the north facade, connects to a second means of access to the community space, which is on level 3. That's the elevator that you see in orange on the upper left. And that's immediately adjacent to the bridge from Liberty Park. I'll talk about the connectivity of that in a moment. The community space we're providing is roughly 11,000 square feet. That's on the 3rd floor. I know there's been desire in the community for a sports hall. We are contending with the fact that this is a building that is based on a core that's in the middle of the plan. So, but I do think that the space we're providing is quite nice because there's good daylight penetration on all sides. And then with those 2 points of access that you see, the other side of this floor is given over to office space. The Liberty Park connection, this slide is really about how pedestrians get to the building, but also to the bridge. And as you know, I think the quickest connection potentially from Battery Park is through the bridge over West Street that comes into the park. And our pedestrian bridge is right in what is now a planted zone, including the Anne Frank tree, just south of the entry to the Greek church. So what we're proposing, the guidelines are not very prescriptive. What we're proposing to do is rather than just have a bridge connecting to the current sidewalk line, is to create a sort of sense of arrival, a welcoming place for people to enter. We're proposing to take the materials used in the paving of Liberty Park and extend those in. So that seating area that you see is one that is part of our proposal. This elevated planting zone, we're trying to make it a welcoming place for people to meet and greet one another before they go into the building. And the design, again, the design of the bench is drawn from existing architectural vocabulary of Liberty Park. This is a rendering at eye level from that welcoming space to the bridge going through. And there, I think maybe we remove the slide, there's a single level elevator that connects and the public stair connects from the second level to the community space, which is 1 floor above. And then just some preliminary views of the tower from different vantage points within the city. So this is Vesey Street, just in the middle of Brookfield Place, looking back to the northwest corner of the tower. We've intentionally designed the building as a series of elements that spiral in space rather than a simple extrusion. I think that's important to make the building feel like it fits into the neighborhood even at this height. And that it also gives you a slightly different perception of the building as you see it from different vantage points. This is the view from directly due west on Albany Street and South End Avenue. And the last slide is the view looking west from Liberty Street, adjacent to Zuccotti Park, and the east end of the building. So again, this is we're early in the design phases. I just wanted to give you an understanding of how we're thinking about the design has been developing. It's been highly influenced by your comments and concerns about public accessibility. And we look forward to presenting to you further as the design continues to develop.
Rob, thank you for that presentation, and thank the community board members for their patience. We went through the different aspects of the project updates. I'll now turn it over to Tammy to help facilitate the Q&A discussion and folks having an opportunity to speak on what we've just presented.
We have a large group here, so we're going to start. We're going to put a timer up. Everybody gets 2 minutes, and for everybody on the board, we're going through once. Literally, if you have a second follow-up, we can come back to you as time allows. We'll start with Justine. I'm looking for hands up, so if a board member would like to speak, instead of going around the table, try and do a hands up for me. And we'll start with Justine.
Amy, I'm going to run the timer for my phone here, and I just want to remind everyone, I'm going to be as equitable as possible with the time. Once it hits 2 minutes, I'm going to hit the mute button. So just for everyone to know, I'm not singling it out.
Yeah, understand at 8:10, we're not singling people out. We're just trying to do the best we can to allow the most amount of people to speak. And so we're not here to limit. So the order that I see thus far is going to be Justine and then Betty. Lucian?
Okay.
There you go, Justine.
I'll go quick. This one is for Darren McQuillan. You were talking about the LEED standard for the buildings, and I think that's the same LEED standards that are on buildings in Battery Park City that are presently, I think all of them have a D rating in terms of the local law 97 and climate changes they have to do. And first clarify that I'm right, that's what the reference is the same. And then the second point is why are we building a building that is not going to be up to whatever local law standards there are for sustainability? Thank you.
So thank you for your question. I can't really speak to the other buildings in Battery Park City, but I can say that this building will be designed to all local law standards with respect to sustainability and everything else. What I said was that it would be designed to LEED Gold standard, which is the same standard that we achieved at 7 World Trade Center, the building I work in, which was the first LEED certified office building in New York City. So LEED Gold is one of the highest of the LEED certification standards, and that's what we're aiming towards. I'm sure as we progress with the design process, there'll be other sustainability goals and objectives that we will set and we'll be able to share with you. But this is designed to be energy efficient and sustainable, a good building for the inhabitants, the people who live and work there, and also a good building for the planet. That's our goal.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. And I'm familiar with 7 World Trade Center. I think that I was lucky enough to get a tour of it at the very beginning. So I'm aware of it. But those buildings in Battery Park City that I'm speaking of are also LEED Gold. So I guess I'm not challenging you. I'm just saying, please look into it. And thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks, Justine.
All right, Betty Kay, you're next.
Yes, thanks. Because this again was a follow-up to last time I asked the question, given what I know about the LEED Gold building, including what I live in. And I guess one of my basic ones is your building going to be all electric? Because I think one of the problems many of our buildings are having is they have a gas component to some of their appliances, which are going to be a big challenge for them having to probably switch everything out.
Betty, that's a very good question. It's something we're looking into, but we haven't determined whether or not that's feasible yet. But you raise a very good point.
Okay, and also if you look at the 2050 standards, because while some buildings, mine's a D, and there are some as low as a 7 by the Departments of Building with a star rating due to local law 97, which is pretty, they're looking at huge sums of money to upgrade, but that's even for 2024. In 2030 standards and 2050 standards, they have to make major changes in their buildings. So I want to, eventually that you're looking forward to those future dates as well for the occupants.
Absolutely. I can tell you that we are certainly looking forward to those future dates.
Great, which I know this stuff isn't even out there yet, but thank you.
Thanks, Betty.
Okay, going down the committee. I don't see any other hands up before I go to the public. Somehow give me a wave if you have a question, because I want to make sure that I once.
So, Tammy, this is Wendy again. I apologize. My hands up seem to work.
Hit it, you're up.
I just wanted to ask a little bit more about the community space, and I apologize, I wasn't at the original presentation. I know Rosa has come back and reported to us that because it's a center elevator space, you won't be able to have something like a gym. But is the ceiling higher? Is it, I'm having a hard time imagining exactly what 11,000 square feet is. Is it the type of thing that you deliver the space raw and then the Manny Cantor Center has to come up with the money to build out the space? Or are you committed to building the design that they want? I'd like to hear more about that community center. If, is it going to be set up so if they had like a kiln or a very high energy kiln or something, that ventilation would be included? Or is this at best like just a room that they can do arts and crafts or like dance?
Hi, Wendy. I think I can say, because we're still at an early stage in the design process, our plan is to work with Manny Cantor and the community and figure out what the very best uses of the space are within the envelope of the building. So obviously we are working with a center core building, which limits us to the things we can do on the floor. But it is early enough in the design to figure out if we needed to do something that involved some sort of ventilation, for example, that we would be able to work that in. But we're hoping that the Manny Cantor folks will be working with you and other members of the community to determine what is the best use of this space for the community. And hopefully we will have enough time in the design process to incorporate that once we've all agreed on what the right thing to do is.
And I apologize because I'm not on that committee in terms of how the Manny Cantor Center was selected, because they're not actually in Community Board 1. I've heard only good things about them. But maybe we can talk offline. Somebody else can tell me how I can, what the process will be in terms of, how the community will give them feedback. But I definitely, is the ceiling height standard ceiling height, or is it higher than normal? Do you know on those floors, or is that part of it's still on the drawing board?
I'll ask Rob if he knows what the ceiling height is on that particular floor, or whether that's still open to design. Rob, do you know? You're on mute. Rob, we can't hear you.
I muted you, Rob.
Okay, thank you. At the moment, I believe that it's roughly an 11-foot tall space. So it's designed, the adjacent space is an office floor. I think it's 14 feet floor to floor. And I think as the design progresses, whether the ceiling is finished or raw, that'll be part of the process. But it's not a low ceiling height space.
Right. Okay. So maybe we can find out more with time. And are you committed to building out their interior space? You have to raise the money to build out the core once you give them 1,000 square feet.
So I'll check with the team, Wendy, but my understanding is that we will build out the space with them. They are our partner in this project. That's not something we're going to try to do somewhere else. I'll double check with you and let you know, but that's my understanding.
Okay, thank you so much.
I think that was my understanding too, Wendy, by the way, from the CAC, is that it wasn't if you put the burden on the not-for-profit, there's a really good chance that it won't get done. And there's a guarantee to the community. So my understanding is that it is being done by the developer. But you are right in saying that we do need to have that confirmed, Dara.
Right, and as high of a ceiling as you can. It's a real multi-purpose room. Obviously, we would love a gym. It's just for a gym, but the more flexibility on ceiling height, and you know, because there's a lot of things they could do, but you know, obviously, anything that could be expanded on the community front. I'm sure we've exhausted you with how much need we have for space for kids. So thank you.
Sure thing. Thanks, Wendy.
I will go at the end because I'm going to echo something similar to Wendy. Vicki Cameron, then Rosa Chang, then Jill Goodkind.
Thank you, Tammy. Just have a couple of comments on the presentation tonight. No real questions. I understand everything. I just want to point out again, and I understand everything about the affordable definition based on federal regulations. But the affordable that is being proposed here, 40,000 per person, 60 for the family, it's a very unreasonable number anywhere in New York City. I'm very concerned about that. One of the reasons that I'm concerned is when families or individuals do move into a neighborhood like this, they simply can't even afford grocery stores. You know, where are their kids going? Where they're summering? Some kids summering, you know, exotic places. That kind of a division makes people apprehensive about moving down here. And in turn, I also wanted to say that while you hired one of the best firms in the world and are very fond of, this tower is for me a reflection of a very fancy corporate tower or a residential tower that will warrant extremely high rents. And once again, you know, it's just more of the same. And we have a lot of this in the neighborhood. And we would prefer to have something that is affordable in real terms. You know, what is a single person at, I don't know, 108 afford, and how do they fit into this building? The look of the building, again, while it's wonderful, I would not like to repeat the Hudson Yards that I often refer to as the Canyon of Glass. And when you make those references and pictures and you just follow certain, you know, heights of cornices and details, it's just not enough for us. I think we would like to have a tower that's a little more humane and fits into the, you know, overall picture of what a home looks like. Thank you.
Charlie, any comments?
Sure. Vicki, thank you for your comments. To address the first part of it, I completely understand what you're saying. The goal is to address the most severely rent-burdened households. I will note that for singles, the income will qualify for a studio as low as $25,000, which is about $700 a month. I understand that some of those individuals that you mentioned, ranging at 40,000, those are for individuals who are families. Those are for families of 3. So I would like to make that clarification. But at 30% of AMI, we are targeting some of the most rent-burdened households.
Well, I understand that, but what I keep saying is you should come down and see what it costs for everything else in this area, right? And Orange is $1.49. You know, it's hard to live here. You have to go miles out of the city to buy groceries, hold them back. Just the entire exchange is a bit unrealistic. What we are asking for down here is true affordable, right? You know, rents where people are paying 30% of their income, whatever that income is, so that they have leftover revenue to spend it on other issues in life and other commodities and other luxuries, saving to buy something. That's what our goal is. And like I said, I understand that you previously told me that you're sticking to affordable guidelines based on federal regulations. That is long gone, and we should reassess that completely.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Vicky, next, Rosa.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. I saw you at the CAC. By the way, we should really change that name to not CAC. But I want to say I actually appreciate that you guys are looking at this. And I do feel, at least from my experience, that you are taking our comments and our input seriously, and you are adjusting as you are able. Obviously, we will keep pushing for more adjustment because that's our job. One of those issues I want to touch on, because I know you've heard a lot about affordable housing, so I'll just touch on what Wendy was touching on, which is the community facility space. I really do feel that 12,000 square feet is incredibly minimal given the overall scale and size of the building, and I do hope that we are going to look at it as a full floor, closer to 25,000 square feet, and double height space that could accommodate a gym. And I'm just putting that out there. And you've heard that at the last meeting. So just wanted to say it out in the public realm because I do think that we, as you know, are desperately in need of more community and civic infrastructure in our neighborhoods. We just don't have it. And the more facilities that we're able to provide for our communities to come together, I think the better our community and the stronger our community will be. So I'll leave it at that. And I do see progress. So I want to thank you.
Thank you for that, Rosa.
Thanks, Rosa. We appreciate your comments, and we welcome you to sit down with us and Manny Cantor, as we figure out what the best use is of that space, because I think you have a lot to add to that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, after Rosa was, I believe, Jill Goodkind, who's one of our public members. And then we're going to go, Richard Corman, you're a board member. I'm not sure why you're down there, but that's okay. And then we'll go to Pat after that. There you go, Richard.
Jill, you're muted.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. My question is two parts. The first and more important part, I think, is that if you could give us a little more information on these set-aside units that you said would be in addition to the 350 already mentioned affordable units. And will the community preference come out of the 350? So what are you looking at in terms of the set-aside, and where will the community preference come out of? That's question number one. Question number two is regarding the making whole thing, which I find very hard to follow. My takeaway from that, and so my question is, correct me if I'm wrong, basically the Port Authority is negotiating an unknown dollar amount for a building that may never have been built, and that's why we don't know the number, because it's going to be whatever you can negotiate. Thank you.
I'll ask Joanna first to just give a clarification on what she described with regards to the affordable housing, and then either Justin or Mike Lavery to speak with regards to the second question.
Sure. I spoke about the community preference as it relates to the 25% of the units that are currently contemplated, which is a little bit over 300 units. The community preference, we will be following the outcome of the case. And if the case is determined in the city's favor, then our hope is that there would be a community preference for 50% of the units. But we will get back to you because there's ongoing litigation, so we cannot make any commitments at this time.
Yeah, and on the second part, it wouldn't be accurate to say that there's no number that's grounding or serving as an anchor for those negotiations. There is. I am not on government relations. A couple of my colleagues who are involved in negotiating are in the audience right now. I don't know if they want to weigh in. I guess they'd have to raise their hand. But I mean, basically, there is the number that we had in mind for what would make this a worthwhile deal. It's not a number that that we can share at this time, but it is a number that we'll be able to, we're going to share with the elected officials soon, and we'll figure out, but we really need to present that in the context of the broader discussion on affordable housing, which is how it was posed to us by the elected officials. But no, I would not say that there's just a floating, get what we can get. There is a real grounding in economics that we're doing these negotiations under. I hope that answers the question.
Not, I think, as directly as we're looking for, Justin, just so you know. All right.
Okay.
Jill, anything? I think you're good, right? Richard Corman was next. I think, Pat, did I lose you somewhere? You had your hand up, so I'll come back to you after Richard.
Yes, hi. Thanks for this. Unfortunately, I missed the beginning of the presentation, so I can't really comment on any of it. As you know, a number of us are advocating for 100% affordability, but I just wanted to comment, with all due respect to Vicky. Many of us have perhaps a slightly different view, which is that we want to see a range of affordability, including middle moderate income, but also housing challenged people. We want to have an opportunity to really bring diversity into Lower Manhattan in a way that it's actually been driven out to some degree. And so I personally would not make the argument that people can't afford to live here. I really want to provide an opportunity for many and a wide variety of people to be able to live in this community. And certainly one way we can do that is by having a very substantial number of affordable apartments in this incredibly unique opportunity here. So I just needed to voice that issue as a bit of a counter, Vicky, with apologies, but unfortunately I don't agree with you.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to add this. Perhaps you misunderstand my point. I was advocating for much greater affordability and much greater variety and more of it. Them singling out a group that it has difficulties, and just giving us that and saying that's good enough is not what I was accepting. I would like exactly what you said, a much greater variety and many, many more units, because that's what we need in our neighborhood.
Great. Then we're in sync.
In agreement. I was just making my point that we need more diversity in this neighborhood, especially. Thank you, Richard.
So thank you, Richard, for the question, and thank you, Vicky, again for the clarification. Currently, the 25% of affordable units that are contemplated include a wide range of affordability from 30% to 80% of AMI. We are receiving, as you both just heard, a wide range of requests from the community board, from other stakeholders in the community. We're receiving a wide range of requests, many for deeply affordable units, some for moderate or middle income units. And so we're weighing all of the requests. We're listening to the community, we're taking it all in, and we're investigating a range of options and talking with the state agencies.
And Vicky, just to clarify, I know my slide had listed a specific AMI band and also incomes according to household side, but that was just to provide an example. It wasn't meant to be an exhaustive list of all of the various income bands. That was, again, just to provide an example. So apologies if we misrepresented that information, but we'll continue to do our homework as we've been directed to do. And once we have some more details and substance to provide, we welcome the opportunity to have a more engaged discussion with the community board.
Tammy, I have one little bit from Jill. There's a kind of a dangling part of her question that just needs to be answered. Dawana, the share of affordable units that you would set aside for survivors if you were able to work out some of the elements of federal law, do you have an idea of what set aside would be, there would be if you had your druthers and you could do so?
We don't know yet, and unfortunately, I cannot make any commitments at this time. We're reviewing the law, So I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for you today on that.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to recognize two members of the public who have been waiting. We're going to go Victoria and then Todd Fine. I believe for our community board members, if you have already spoken and you do not have a follow-up question, please put your hand down. So Victoria is first and then Todd Fine. And Jill, if you do not have a second question, please put your hand down as well. Thank you.
Victoria, you're unmuted and your time starts now.
Hi, thank you. And thanks so much for being here for your presentation tonight. I'm Victoria Fariello. I'm a district leader downtown, and I'm also a member of 100% of the Coalition for 100% Affordable Housing downtown. And just want to remind you that we have lost thousands of affordable housing downtown, thousands. And this is truly the one opportunity that we have to help make us whole that way. But I'll get to my questions quickly. So I wanted to know if you could give us a sense of the procedural posture that is going on. What are the steps that need to be taken in order for a final decision? And also what it really has felt like a complete lack of transparency. We have not been engaged. We did not know about the elected officials meeting with the ESD or anyone else. And we'd like to be informed. We'd like to have more participation and more transparency. So I would really love to know what you plan to do to make that happen. And just, you know, this being so late at night, my children are outside waiting for me to put them to bed. This is not helpful. This is not transparency for so many of us. So that's my question.
Thank you for that question, and I appreciate you making the time to be a part of tonight's community board meeting, given your personal and family commitments. I think we can all appreciate the effort that's placed to advocate on behalf of your constituency. With regards to, if I understand your first question, with regards to the procedural posture of where we are, you know, we are still in the early phases of this project, and part of what we pride ourselves on is to have the opportunity to come before the community board. Of course, there's engagement through the CAC, but we've found different ways to be able to come to the community board. You know, it's standard for us across various parts of projects for ESD to meet with elected officials, and not really sure what the avenue would be in terms of advertising or broadcasting that, but you know, I can circle back with the team to see ways in which we can provide those updates. I think, you know, discussing that here publicly at this community board meeting is one avenue, but we can think through that some more. As it relates to the final decision, I think, again, we've just started, you know, to talk through the public approvals process for the project. There'll be actions that will be taken related to just a look at the modifications to the general project plan for the project to allow for there to be residential use on this tower. As I noted earlier, right now the GPP are boards for commercial development, and there will need to be a modification to the GPP to allow for residential use. So there's a full process that will take us through a couple of months and well into 2022. I don't know if I can draw a line as to when the finish point would be, but why don't we take that as part of our homework, and to be able to, as we continue our discussions with the elected officials, as we come back to the community board, and as we think creatively about how to ensure public engagement in hours that might be more accommodating to folks in their schedules, we'll be able to give you those updates. So I thank you for that. I understand your concern about there being a lack of transparency, but again, by using the public forum and public platform of the community board and other opportunities that will be afforded to us, we'll hope to continue the public engagement efforts.
Thank you very much. I think we would have loved to have had you first. That lies solely with the responsibilities that we have as a community board for when we lose quorum at a meeting. So for all
and I just, again, I want to thank, I know we're still going through the public comments and questions, but I would like to express a great thanks to your team, Tammy, to Lucian, to Diana, and working with us You know, we are all still navigating this very unique times that we live in, and there are a number of various scheduling conflicts and, you know, virtual, new hybrid, new normal that we're all adjusting to. So we'll try our best again to make ourselves as available as we can. Again, while we make time to do our homework, prepare the presentations, and also be respectful of your time. So again, just a quick intermission to say thank you, and we appreciate you bearing with us, and it's already 8:38 at night.
And brings us to Todd Fine. Lucian, if you would unmute Todd.
Yep. You're unmuted.
Yes, hello. Yes, hello. I'm also with the Coalition for 100%. Senator Brian Kavanaugh has proposed an open forum for the whole community to discuss 5 World Trade Center. And I think that's an opportunity for Community Board to do a reset on this entire process. Many of the questions that haven't been answered for 7 months, and I still can't understand why we can have a Community Board meeting when we had a meeting 5 months ago. We were asked to send written questions. They haven't been answered. That's a total disrespect to this Community Board. It should not be allowed. And they can't just answer questions, you know, pitter patter throughout the presentation. You have written questions, they receive written responses. That lack of transparency discredits the entire thing. And this meeting was supposed to be an opportunity for the public to engage because they were cut off from the last meeting. Now we have 2 people, it's late at night. This is, again, we need a really full public engagement, which we hasn't had for 7 months. But I have a question. One question is, how many other residential bids did you receive in the RFP process? But my main point is about history, because the architect talked about said it's going to be a historical reference to the Little Syria neighborhood, basically. Greenwich South is an artificial construction created by the real estate industry. This neighborhood is called Little Syria, the Lower West Side, or Bowling Green Village. We do not accept that artificial term. They talked about 2 buildings in this neighborhood, but we have to keep in mind, this building, I wrote a report called Voluntary Destruction Since 9/11. 35% of landmarks recommended for designation in this neighborhood have been demolished since 9/11, and there hasn't been any attempt to protect them. We're still trying to protect these very Little Syria buildings they talk about. They talk about that they're encouraged to refer to St. George Restaurant. Well, St. George is actually St. George's Syrian Catholic Church. It's part of Arab American heritage. I don't see any reference to that in a glass tower. This is sort of a cultural appropriation. It's disrespectful. The best way to honor the Syrians who went to St. George's Syrian Catholic Church is to build it as affordable housing fully for this low income neighborhood. And the same thing is true for 16 Rector Street, which is they
Mr. Fine, I applaud your ability to be able to speak under such time constraints. Thank you for offering such a range of comments. I will attempt to be as responsive to as many of them as I can. With regards to your note about Senator Kavanaugh discussing an opportunity for there to be a public forum and an open forum on the meeting, we'll be sure to follow up with the Senator's office to discuss that and see what platforms and opportunities would be available for us to work with the elected officials to have such form of public engagement. You've noted that we've answered some of your questions through our various presentations to the Community Board, that the questions that were submitted to the Community Board in writing and some have not been answered. I will review the notes and the list of questions that we have. I believe that our past presentation in August had some of the questions that were addressed in writing and the slides that were provided. But again, we'll review that and we'll be sure to be as responsive as best as we can to those questions, not just from your organizations, but from the Community Board and the public as well. You'd noted a question with regards to how many other residential bids we'd received for the RFP. As I'd noted earlier, because this project and where we are, we're still in the middle of an open procurement. We're not yet able to speak to the number of bids or to the details of some of the responses that we received. At the appropriate time, when we're able to do so, we'll be sure to share those details. You'd noted with regards to the history of Greenwich South and also the neighborhood known as Little Syria. Again, we appreciate that comment. We'll be sure to continue the discussion, as Rob mentioned, as we advance the design of the building. Nothing is final yet. They're still very much in the early stages. And as we get your comment, as we get your feedback, we're incorporating that as best as we can into the confines of the building and the location. Thank you for providing me with that context as it relates to St. George's Restaurant. We'll think of more ways, again, to be able to honor that heritage. I'm sensitive to your note with regards to cultural appropriation, so I choose on a personal note to shy away from that. And as best as we can, we look forward to additional opportunities to be able to engage the community. Like we've said, related to affordable housing, we hear you. The Bar and Omni have a strong history and heritage and responsibility and expertise in developing affordable housing across the city and the state and also on the federal level. So they're closely looking at this and want to be as best responsive to the responses to the questions that we've gotten from the community and also the direction that we've received from the elected officials. I hope I've covered as best as I can most of your comments, but again, we welcome the opportunity to continue the ability to come before the community board and to try to the best of our ability to be responsive to the questions and comments that we've received. Tammy, I'll turn it back over to you. I don't know if there are other hands that were raised or other comments that we need to respond to.
You at least, I know you can't divulge the details of the bids. Can you at least qualify how many bids were received?
I'm not sure, and as a government employee, I'd like to just be able to go back to the team to confirm what we can and cannot share. You know, earlier today, and as part of my presentation, I'd noted what the selection committee looked like. It was compiled of representatives from the city, the Port Authority, and ESD. That was information that I was told I was able to share, but for sake of, again, running afoul of direction that I haven't been given, I'll have to come back to the team on that.
That would be great. It is a longstanding question, so I mean, it at least gives us a little bit of.
Yeah, and so if we can, we'll be able to share the number of bids. I don't know if we can share the details on the bids. Again, wanting to just be careful of where we are in the procurement process, but once we're able to share, we'll be sure to follow up on that. So I'm making a note to myself to confirm the number of bids.
Thank you. Richard Corman, your hand. This is second round through. So this will be a limited opportunity of a couple people if there are still hands up.
No, that was from before. Sorry.
Fantastic. I'm not sure why Bob's next over in the attendee list, or Laura. They should both.
People who signed in while I was working on the other thing I don't see come on. So Bob, I'm moving you over.
So let me check in with Bob. Please move Laura Starr back over, and let's just ensure that they didn't have questions and I missed them because it looks like they were. Laura, yes, your hand is up.
I just put my, can you hear me? I just put my hand up. No, I just wanted to second what Vicky said about the aesthetics of the building. And, you know, I hope that we can have a building that it fits in more with the aesthetic of Lower Manhattan. That's all I wanted to say.
Duly noted. Thank you for that.
I would echo all of that. All right, so I've gotten Laura. Bob Schneck, did you have anything else? And so then Victoria, your hand is still up. Lucian, would you unmute Victoria and see if she has anything else? I have.
Sure. Victoria, unmute.
Thank you. Hi, and thanks. I just wanted to ask if you could give us a date by which you will answer our question, so we know.
I'm not able to give you a date. Again, it would require just me circling back the team. There are some questions that we've already provided answers to, but I, at this moment, can't commit to a date.
Don't worry, Victoria. I'm perfectly happy to help stock.
Tammy has stocked, and we're working through it. But I can offer you fluff, but I won't do that. In all sincerity, we will, as best as we can, provide updates. We take the time to prepare properly for these meetings, and when we can share information, we will, and if we're not able to, we won't.
So I have a couple thoughts that I wanted to put out there before we say thank you and good night. One of the things that we have spoken of was open public space, which I understand you're connecting to the walkway, and that's great. And the community space will be lovely. We talked about active space because it is so cold down here that we used to have, Bob's next hand is up, so I'll go to Bob afterwards. We used to have opportunities that were enclosed years and years ago, like a tennis bubble and other things that were indoor recreation locations that could be active to help with people of all ages. It's one of the things for the community use space. So it does concern me in terms of, as Wendy was indicating, ceiling height, glass, things like that. We don't want to make it so beautiful that it has crystal chandeliers and can't be a multi-purpose use. Potentially, we are drastically short of gym spaces and active rec. We're also drastically short of things for our seniors in the community. And we are obviously hoping some of the affordability.
Thank you, Tammy.
We're hoping that much of the affordability allows the seniors to age in place who are in our community, or quite frankly, I'll be a senior by the time this thing gets built. I'd like to age in place and stay in the neighborhood as everything gets swapped to condos and co-ops, and there is limited, which is part of the structural push that we have for affordable housing. And lastly, I do believe that the building, although somewhat thoughtful to what we've been talking about, I would love to see more integration of more of the historic neighborhood. So it is more contextual on 3 out of 4 of the sides of the building. And it is something more interesting on the south and the west side instead of a flush flat panel. If it's going to truly be able to bridge the old and the new, I don't see that yet. I really appreciate the look on the garage doors over by the loading dock. Yes, you were listening to the things that we said in the CAC meeting about trying to incorporate and make that side of the building more alive, because it is a dark and sort of a unwelcoming location, and everything that this building is adding is not adding any positive aspect in terms of enlivenment and quality of life and streetscape. So that is one small touch, and I appreciate the touch and the listen. We look forward to further opportunities for what that could be. And with that, Bob Schneck, and after Bob, I'm going to close this section.
Okay. Am I on?
You are.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say that I'm very interested in this project, but I didn't really know much about it. And I think I came very late to the party, and I very much believe that it's important for us to have as much affordable housing as possible. So I'm in the school of 100%. But I would also like to add that this structure is in a special relationship to what is going to be one of the major performing arts centers in the country. So we're 2.5 blocks away, say, from the Perelman Performing Arts Center, and that's a real opportunity for this structure at least to have perhaps 2 floors that are dedicated to artist housing and artist projects. And so thank you so much for this chance to participate in this.
Bob, I appreciate that feedback, and that's something that we'll make note of and continue to think through with the team.
That goes very well into some of the work that Dara's team does with artists and residents and things like that. So that would really be a nice tie-in from the past to the future. So I'm glad Bob brought that up. I do want to say thank you to Mike Lavery and the team from the port for coming and being willing to be here, as well as the architect team and everyone from the housing team. It was very nice of everybody to be here. It was great to start the conversations with the public with more information than we've had in the past. We look forward to a dialogue about Liberty Street and access to this building, because its success in the neighborhood and integration is based on taking a look at what the EIS was, which was incomplete based on what the new usage of this building is. And the EIS did not take into any considerations for outside the immediate area, west of West Street, all the way up through Broadway. And that is super important. So we look forward to all of that. So with that, thank you very, very much for coming. And next time, if it's okay for all of you, I would prefer to do it as a meeting just for you, not within a committee. We can do it as a public hearing, and that way we can start right at 6 o'clock.
Thank you again to the board members. Thank you to Tammy, Lucia, and Diana. We appreciate it, and I hope you all have a successful rest of the meeting and have a good night.
Thanks,
Tammy.
Tammy.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Good night. You.
Okay, so.